UTA Officer Preston Fenwick's use of deadly force at 225 West 900 South, Salt Lake City, Utah on September 1 of 2022. As a result of the use of force, the investigative task force was led by West Valley City Police Department protocol team, which comprised of law enforcement officers employed by agencies other than the UTA. The following facts were developed during the protocol investigation of the matter, which was led by West Valley City as the investigative task force. And should additional or different facts subsequently come to light, the opinions and the conclusions contained in this review would likewise be different. The following facts were established. On the evening of September 1, 2022, UTA officers Preston Fenwick and Ryan Morrill heard a commotion and observed two males having an altercation on the northwest corner of 200 West and 900 South in Salt Lake City. The officers shined their flashlights in the direction of the men. One of the men, who was later identified as Mark Leonard Lovato, turned and walked away westbound around the corner and out of their sight. The officers approached and spoke with the other man, who told them that Mr. Lovato was chasing him with a knife. Believing Mr. Lovato to be the suspect in a possible aggravated assault, the officers went to make contact with Mr. Lovato. When the officers reached the corner, the officers shined their flashlights on Mr. Lovato, who was down the sidewalk in the front of the Spy Hop Callard Youth Media Center and was walking away. The officers gave multiple verbal commands to stop and come and talk. Mr. Lovato did not comply. Rather, Mr. Lovato turned towards the officers and waved his left arm in their direction while holding an object, presumably a knife, in that hand, and began yelling at them, and continued quickly to the west end of the building and around the southwest corner out of the view. Officer Morrell communicated over the radio that the man had a knife and was very aggressive. Officer Fenwick and Morrell hurried to the end of the Spy Hop building where they could see Mr. Lovato. As later described by Officer Morrell, Mr. Lovato clearly had a knife in his right hand, which looked like an industrial type of box cutter knife, and the blade was protruding out. Mr. Lovato was facing them with both hands out, swinging and waving the knife around and bringing it up, walking in circles, saying nonsensical things as "effing kill me," end quote, and being very aggressive. Officer Fenwick and Morrill drew their handguns and gave repeated commands to drop the knife and to stop. Mr. Lovato did not comply. Mr. Morrell later described that Mr. Lovato began walking towards them and then paused so as to begin to transition. So he began walking towards them and then he paused, so he began to transition to his taser, which was a non-lethal weapon. In that moment, Mr. Lovato charged at them with the knife, yelling and waving and swinging around. As the officers backpedaled on the sidewalk, Mr. Lovato quickly ran up to them with the knife and closed the distance. At this moment, Officer Fenwick fired several times at Mr. Lovato. Mr. Lovato fell to the ground, having reached within a few feet of the officers. The officers removed the knife from Mr. Lovato's immediate vicinity, took him into custody, and rendered emergency medical aid until he was transported to a hospital where he was treated for multiple non-fatal gunshot wounds. Based on the available physical evidence in this case at this time, let me just go ahead and indicate that what we will show you is a couple of videotapes that we have. They are from the UTA that try to capture what happened. Some of it is kind of grainy, so I will show you that in its normal speed, and then I will also show you a close-up version of what we had. As the part of the investigation, we also had, as I said, testimony from Officer Morrell. Officer Fenwick did not give us a statement, as is his constitutional right, but we were also able to talk to and get a testimony from two other witnesses who were civilian witnesses. Those two civilian witnesses, one that we will identify as AG, talked about that they heard the officer say, "Put the knife down, put the knife down." and that they also heard 6 to 7 times that the man did not do so. And AG said that the man came towards the officers really quickly with a knife, and that was when the officers fired or shot at him. There was another civilian witness that we also relied upon. Dio said named Dio. Dio said that the man screamed at the officers and then ran around the corner of the spy hop where he could no longer see him. Dio said then the man was coming, had something in his hand, was about 2 to 3 feet away, and was running pretty quick. Dio said that he heard 3 shots and was about 30 yards away in the middle of the intersection when the incident happened. At the scene, there were 4 9mm cartridge casings which were recovered. And also was recovered a folding sport knife, a utility knife, which had the knife on one end and a utility razor blade on the other. So at this time, let me go ahead and show you what we have. Before we start this is the surveillance video from the building. This is probably the most clearest one, but I must caution that the action moves away to the right bottom hand corner. But this actually shows the officers responding, but you will be able to capture their stepping back from the scene at that time. So go ahead and play that, Keith. So this is on the building looking down, and you will see the 2 officers moving back. And at that point, the firing has already happened. Now, what is important to note here is that Officer Morrill is on the right-hand side. But as he comes back, consistent with his statement, he goes to gun, but he also goes to taser. And he explained in his statement to us that he went non-lethal because he saw Fenwick had the lethal weapon, and at that point, when he initially made the decision to go to less lethal, Mr. Lovato was not approaching on them. So as he starts to transition to lethal, he notices that Lovato starts to come at him, and he indicated that both officers who had approached Mr. Lovato start to back up and move back from him, trying to put distance between them. But as he comes closer and closes that distance, the shots are fired. Play that one more time, please, if you can. So with that context in mind, we're going to just play that one more time for you at normal speed. And he's moving to taser. He pulls the taser out, but the shots have been fired at that point. That's what we could not capture from that side. Then there was, we'll go to the next video. Now, before you play that, let me just sort of say, this is very grainy, but the action will happen in this area right here. Now, I just wanted to play it at normal speed to you, but then we will play another one where we were able to move and zoom in, and that will become a little bit more clearer. So go ahead and play this, please. Now, one of the problems so you can see the bodies moving there. One of the problems that we had, and you'll see this officer's moving here, is that there was certain skips. There's a skip that happens in the video itself. They light up. You can see Mr. Lovato going around the corner. The 2 officers are approaching. And he comes out, he's lit, and you can see him moving towards the officers when he comes at them. And so while this is from the long distance part of it, it is consistent with both the civilian witnesses' statements as well as Officer Morrill's statement. So then we were able to take this and go ahead and go to the next video. This is played again at half speed, a little bit slower. So you can see, now focus with this, you can see that there's movement, and you can see Mr. Lovato coming at him, and with that hand as he moves towards them. That was the piece that we did not capture in that earlier video that we had. But what is important to note is that as they come up, he's around the corner, and they're making commands to him. But then when he comes back, he comes and starts to close that distance with the box cutter in his hand, and that is when Officer Fenwick makes the decision to fire. Officer Morrow has transitioned to less lethal when he had come across, but as he said in our statement, that at that point when he started to encroach upon him, it was his perception that at that point that distance was being closed, and he was in fear for his life, and he certainly believed that Mr. Lovato would have cut him with the box cutter. At the scene, so go to the next part of it. This is what was recovered at the scene, and this has both a knife on it with the box cutter that had been identified by the officers who saw it at the scene. We don't believe this was out, but certainly this was certainly what was there. So when the scene happened, when the shooting occurs, the officers kicked that away. It was next to the body of Mr. Lovato, and so there was a crime scene. Go ahead to the next photograph. This is with the box cutter part that is folded out. The other part is not exposed, but it was kicked away from the scene as one of the officers indicated. That when Mr. Lovato was shot at that time. So taking into conclusion the statements that were given to us both from our investigators as well as the statements from the two independent witnesses and the statement from Mr. Morrell, it was our conclusion that should this charges be filed, that it is not unreasonable for the officer to articulate that their lives is in danger, and as such, we refuse to file any criminal charges, and we conclude that the use of force was reasonable as justified under the affirmative defense statute. So with that, I will open myself up to any questions. Anybody?
No body cam?
No, there was no body cam. It is the policy of UTA, from what I understand, that they do not have body cams because they often are doing enforcement actions on UTA platforms, and those have cameras there. So that is what we understand. That is why we didn't have any body-worn cameras, and we're very lucky that the building certainly had those cameras there that we could rely upon to make that. And also because in this particular case, we had two civilian witnesses who corroborated the statements of Officer Morrell. Anybody? Yes?
Was there between the initial confrontation and the shooting?
It was actually very quickly it happened. What happens is that the officers are out there, they hear this ruckus happen, so their attention is drawn towards that. And as they start to move towards that, what the facts are, Mr. Lovato has starting to move, so they make contact with the alleged victim, who communicates to the officers that this person was threatening to harm him with a knife. And at that point, based on that statement and Mr. Lovato walking away, they then decide to go pursue Mr. Lovato as they call on their dispatch that they believe that an aggravated assault has happened. They've got a victim here, and they're contacting for backup, but they don't want to lose sight of him. So they see him, and they continue to pursue him in real time. Mr. Lovato goes around the corner of the building so they start to run up to him, and as they come around, they see him, according to Mr. Morrell, Officer Morrell, that he is pacing around around the corner. He's got the knife in his hand, or the box cutter. He is making nonsensical statements, and at that point they're yelling. So they're already starting to yell at him. As soon as they hear that, they're actually yelling at him as they're running towards him and giving him commands. And certainly as they come around the corner, they give him commands, and then he starts to close that distance. So it was in real time. There wasn't a gap that occurred in terms of any minutes or anything like that. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Got the letter and the press release that will go out in a couple hours here, but we'll give them to you guys because you can. Two documents.